Okay, welcome back. In this session, I wanted to discuss something that has been coming up quite a bit lately with a lot of people, a lot of my students, and I wanted to address it. I did a poll, just to give you a little background here. I did a poll on Facebook a little while ago, a couple of months ago, and it was a simple question: just what is your greatest struggle as a songwriter? What do you struggle with the most? And the results were a little surprising because I expected it to be, okay, melody, lyrics, structure, arrangement, okay, how to, put everything together at the end, produce it potentially, that kind of a list. And it was that kind of a list, actually. That was, all of those things were on there. But there was one thing interjected in position number 2, which really surprised me. I did not expect that. So the number 1 thing was melody. The number 2 thing was getting your music out there. So basically promotion. How do I promote this thing? I've written it, I've produced it, whatever, or just guitar vocal, piano vocal, whatever you did with it. Now, how do I get it out there? How do I get it heard? How do I get it to the people that matter? Not just fans, but potentially record labels or publishers or whatever. And I was very surprised by that. I really didn't expect that. But at the same time, it's a question that always comes up. So it's a regular thing, but usually, of course, it's after the songwriting process. Obviously, I've got my song, now what? Okay, so, and that's why I guess with that poll, I was a little surprised because I sort of was asking about the actual writing of a song and not getting it out there, although I wasn't specific. Okay, so obviously people just thought, okay, well, I have my song. My biggest struggle is promoting it, getting it out there. So, but I wanted to talk about this a little bit because obviously it's a big deal. So you've got your song, you've got your music, you've got a bunch of songs, whatever the case may be. Maybe you have an EP, maybe you have an album, whatever. So how do I get my songs out there? Now, this is a 2-part type of question because if you're just a songwriter, strictly a songwriter, and not a performing songwriter or singer-songwriter, what we call them, then you're going to have a different challenge to the singer-songwriter. Obviously, the singer-songwriter that is performing, you're the artist and the writer. Okay, so you've got like a double the challenge of the songwriter because the songwriter, strictly songwriter, has a lot more flexibility. Okay, if you're not going to perform the song yourself, the only thing you really need to get across or to sell is your song and not yourself. So as an artist, you got to do both, right? You've got the song, which has to be great, obviously, but you got you as well. You also have to be great. All right? So you got double the challenge, but if you're just a songwriter, then of course getting the music out there will depend on a variety of factors. So the first challenge would be to actually get it in the hands of someone that can take it and further, move it along, right? Or get it to a producer's hands, or even an artist, the actual artist themselves. You can get your music, you can pitch your music to artists these days directly. There's no doubt about that. That wasn't that easy 20 years ago, okay? But these days you can actually get it to artists. But having said that, if you can pitch it to an artist directly, so can 1,000 other people. Okay, because that's what used to happen back in the day. So back in the day, you had a situation where you would write your song, do a demo of it, whether you did it yourself. Now we're talking about strictly songwriters, right? Not performing songwriters, not singer-songwriters, just strictly songwriters. So what you would do back in the day, if you couldn't get on with a publisher, you would pitch it to publishers for sure. But at the same time, you could also pitch it to A&R people at record companies. They still exist, okay? They haven't gone anywhere, but their role is very different to what it used to be. Okay, and their criteria is very different as well. So back in the day, especially in the pop world, they would marry songs with artists, 100%, okay? Artists like Whitney Houston or, Celine Dion or, all these pop divas of the day, all of them, would always be looking for songs. no doubt about it, okay? So some of them wrote and co-wrote as well. I think Mariah Carey is a good example of that. She was one of those divas that wrote quite a lot of her stuff, but at the same time, she co-wrote and also was pitched songs from songwriters directly to her through her management, through the A&R people of her record company, and so on. So these days, that's not really the case. You know, these days you can actually, the channels are pretty much the same. The management structure is pretty much the same, but reaching these people is in a way easier, but in a way much more difficult. Easier because we've got the internet, okay? Everything is accessible. You can get information. You can even find out where someone lives these days. Okay, back in the day, you couldn't do that. These days, you have all the information available to you. But the problem with that is that so does everyone else. So I would argue that it's even more difficult these days because they're fully accessible to everyone. So they'd be getting bombarded online, private messages, Instagram, wherever they are, they would be bombarded by constant messages from songwriters, from publishers, from bands, from, just like pretty much anyone, right, would have access to these people, plus fans. Back in the day it was fan mail. You literally wrote mail and, sent it out. Just like songwriters actually had, like, on cassette, okay, you'd have your song and you'd send what we used to call unsolicited material. If you didn't have the contacts, you didn't have the connections, it would be all unsolicited. The unsolicited would go straight into a bin. That was the reality back then. Back in those days, if it wasn't solicited, it would go straight in the bin. Why? Not enough hours in the day. It's simple mathematics. Not enough ears and hours in the day to listen to everything that came in. That's how much came in on a daily basis. Universal Music, Capitol Records back in the day, all of these record companies would be bombarded by demos, cassettes, all kinds of packages, all kinds of elaborate packages, some very simple, nothing in there except a cassette and a name. They wouldn't even open them. Okay, they wouldn't even open them. And there's two reasons. Like I said, obviously not enough hours in the day, not enough ears. That was the first problem. But the second problem was they didn't want to open themselves up to any kind of plagiarism cases, any potential plagiarism cases down the road, where somebody would be like, oh yeah, well, I sent it to you and you opened it because, you contacted me. You said, oh, we're not interested. The fact that you said we're not interested means you listened to it. Right? Down the road, they release a song that sounds similar to it. They've got a case. Boom, you're in court. Okay, so they wouldn't even open them. Now, they would concede that definitely they're probably missing out on opportunities there. For sure, there would be some songs, like most of it was not really great, okay? But there would be some songs in there that would be amazing, but it'd be like finding a needle in a haystack. Just too many demos, too much material. That was back then. These days, I would argue that it's a similar problem, okay? And the accessibility that people have to all of these record companies and all of these artists is just, it's never been as open as it is now. And so what happens? Well, they shut down. You try sending a DM to someone's inbox, someone like a Taylor Swift, as an example, it'll never be seen. There are layers of people. First of all, there's someone definitely managing her social media. That's for sure. Okay, probably multiple people managing it because she gets like so much fan mail and so much, just like constant bombardment of attention on these people. So they're not accessible at all. So look, as a songwriter, strictly as a songwriter, you're coming up, you've got songs, look for people at your level. What does that mean? Well, local people, local artists, local bands. There's plenty of them, okay? Hit the pubs, hit the clubs, all right? Find these bands that are doing covers, or maybe they have a couple of originals, or even if they do have originals and you feel like your songs would be really well suited for them, pitch them. And you can pitch them face to face. They're 100% accessible. Okay, and they don't have a queue outside of the building of people waiting to talk to them, whether fans or artists or whatever, or producers, because they're still at the bottom where you are. If you're at the bottom, we're assuming now that you're just like starting off, okay, or just trying to pitch artists, and you have no connections and you have no inside way of getting to some of the more established artists. Okay, stick to your level as a songwriter. If you're a singer-songwriter, so if you do both, if you're a performing artist and you write your music and you want to pitch your music and yourself, that's different, because you're not just selling your song, you're selling yourself, you're selling a package over here. So what you're after really is fans, right? And some kind of a deal. Producer, publisher, record company, whatever. You got the business side of things, but you also have to contend with the artist side of stuff, the artistic challenge. Okay, so you got a double trouble. Okay, so, but one can feed the other. So these days, the way it works, and it used to work the same way back in the day. Like I've heard some people say that, oh, you know, these days you have to have a really big following and you have to be so. Well, back in the day too, you know, record companies, their ears would stand up, and you'd get their attention by filling out clubs. Okay, by doing your own thing, by having a fan base already. Okay, except the only difference back then was it was, you know, live. A&R people would actually come to the club and see what the commotion is all about. Whereas these days, they go to your social media, right? They go to your YouTube, your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, whatever it is. Okay, so they can see it that way. But there is an expectation from the business side of things that you've already got the ball rolling. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is a big deal. If you're coming up and you're just trying to get your songs out there on the business side of things, and you're an artist, so singer-songwriter type of deal, you better have a following, okay? Because otherwise, the chances of being considered in any way for any kind of a deal, even a distribution deal, although you can get distributors, having said that, you can get a distribution from Distro, you know, and CD Baby and stuff like that. Of course, they'll put all your music on Spotify and the other streaming services. But to get any kind of attention, you have to build that fan base, okay? There's no way around that. And it's not a new concept, okay? So please don't let anybody tell you that, oh, these days it's a lot more difficult because, you know, they have to see a bunch of streams and a bunch of followers and a bunch of whatever. It was the same back in the day. It really was. You know, record companies would very rarely, they would do it, they would have budgets, and by the way, their budgets back then were much bigger than they are now. Okay, they were making tons of money back then. So they had a lot of money to put into, you know, development. Okay, there were a lot of A&R. The A&R department back then was booming. It was a lot more robust and busy than it is these days. These days, they put a lot more emphasis on you doing your own thing rather than them developing you. So if they found someone that's really talented but hasn't had the following yet, you could potentially sign that kind of a deal, okay, where they develop you for several years and really nurture you and put a lot of money into that, okay? So they had the budgets for that. These days, they don't do that anymore. So I think that'd be the biggest difference of record companies these days and what they used to be. Okay, they used to have a lot more money to develop artists and to give them a chance, to take a chance basically on them, you know? Whereas these days they won't do that. The money is just not there. Okay, that's the bottom line. Streaming services pay next to nothing. All right. Although I think they retain 30%. Spotify, iTunes, I think they're all about the same. The streaming services, they keep, I think, 30%. And the record companies 50 and the artist 20. It's some kind of a split like that. But you're looking at 0.002 or 0.003 cents per stream. Okay, so it takes a lot. It takes a lot. So that's why when they're looking at signing anyone, and giving them advances and putting them in recording studios and spending a bunch of money on them, they want to see that they've already got the ball rolling in a big way. Okay, and development is usually these days not part of the deal. You already need to be developed. Okay, so, and that's the thing. So getting your music out there, promoting it, obviously online, all the social media channels, obviously Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them are where you can actually promote your, even YouTube. Okay, so, and put yourself out there. And then from there, market it. How? Well, again, gigging is a big deal, for sure. It always has been, it always will be. People still love going out, they still love seeing bands, and that's the best way to connect with people. Actually going out there as an artist, okay, obviously. Collaboration is another big one. So as an artist, you can collaborate with others as well. Even if you're just a songwriter, okay, that too is a big thing. Collaboration is always a big thing. Going it alone, guys, I keep telling everyone, okay, going it alone is a mistake, all right? Collaborate. Every opportunity you have, every chance you have, even if it's not another artist or another songwriter, even with producers, engineers, mixers, get into, because everyone's connected. It's like this whole network of people, and the more you collaborate, the better the chances of getting your music out there. Okay? So I hope that helps you guys out, and until next time, take care.